got to send out that little video to the Instagram guys. Hopefully we catch some ground here. Got to resend that. Where is that video? Need to replay that thing. Hopefully we get everybody in here. I think everybody forgot. Live right now, guys. Come on, baby. Where is everybody? Come on, people. Should have left it on / Fk8td. Go. What's up? What's up? Come on, let's get everybody in here. Why is it going to my app? I don't want it to go to my app. Shoot, guys. I'm trying to get everyone. Come. Sorry for being late. I am. There we go. Give everybody the link. All right. So we're definitely going to get into the SI head. I got to have that thing in the hot tank right now, though. So let's get everybody in here. Get them in from Messenger. Get them all here. Hopefully this turns out to be a little bit better. Sorry for moving the schedule over, guys. I just had to do it. Just got too crazy during the week. It's been crazy now, too. So as you can see, I've got a table full of parts here. I was just tearing apart that SI cylinder head. All right. Seems like everybody likes it Thursday better, but unfortunately, oh, come on, phone. Let's see how many people. Do me a favor, guys. If you're in the room, please tell people that we are live. Please share it. So basically, a customer of mine sent me an SI cylinder head, and they basically, unfortunately, hydrolocked the motor. And what I found was I had some very minorly bent valves in there, and I didn't expect to run into so much carbon inside the cylinder head. So right now, she's sitting in the hot tank, cooking away, getting all the carbon off of the cylinder head so I can see what I'm contending with. So that's going to definitely help. So might as well show you guys what I'm doing here. Just stacking up what I got as far as valves go. So while the bend is not major, it's minor. The car did not really run long afterwards. So what I found was trying to pop the valves out of the cylinder head. They just wanted to jam. So these are pretty much junk. But what I think I can use them for is, because they're smaller, to shroud in the Fk8 head. See, the stem of the valve is the same 5.5 millimeter. So I guess I'll have to do closed loop first today, because closed loop is we're all going to have happen first because I'm waiting for that cylinder head to clean up. So, but I will bring it in here. And I am so sorry, guys. I am just absolutely slammed completely. So, oh, I got rockers. I thought you guys might find this a little bit interesting. So, in rocker assemblies, one of the easiest ways to tell which rocker arm setup is which is on the exhaust side. You're going to have a notch in these. So you'll see a notch there. Man, really should have kept this on Thursday. Come on, peoples. Let's get in the room. So who's here so far? Throw me a wave. Who's in here? Who do we got in here so far? Where'd that other box go? So I am making an announcement too. I'm coming out with D10 springs for the Fk8. Now it took me a hot minute to get them because they were on like national back order on everything. Where is my coffee? Here we go. I guess too many people are working at the moment. What's up, buddy? Hey, man, I haven't heard from you in a while. How you been, bro? How you doing? Where is my? There's my markers. Right? There's that. Now, where is my glass cleaner? How's the car, man? How you doing with the traction control system and all that? How's that working out for you with the PID? What's up, Angel? All right. I guess give me like another minute and a half. And what I'll do is after I do that, I will what's up, Tim? I will start getting into how closed loop functions. And it's going to be more than just literally closed loop. It's going to explain a lot when it comes down to dealing with and understanding how the operating system of a tuning works. Parted with the G series kit. I'm going to put another setup together soon. Really? Yeah, I'm doing good, man. Thanks. I'm surprised, man. Why part ways with a G series kit? 7163. I've been debating going for a G30 770 for my built motor. I know they are not exactly comparable, but I want your opinion on my tuner cracked 600 wheel horsepower. You're not going to do it on a 7163. It's just not big enough. The G30 770 will get you there. 7163 probably high 500s. It's really good for response, but the 7163 is obviously going to spool faster. That's 100% just going to be the way they are, but you just won't have that top end efficiency. So you really need to think about, like, what am I doing? Am I doing cams? Am I doing just a ported head? If the head's not ported or cams, you're just not going to hit 600. So that's really just relevant to that. So let's get into closed loop. Let's see if was like the last time that was closer on the board. I don't know if I can zoom in on that. Let's do this. Let me move this over. There we go. All right. So a lot of people just understand closed loop as trims work, and this is true. But basically, cams and TR2. So yeah. So the easiest, honestly, and I'm going to tell everybody this, and I always agree with this, is that porting the head is going to make more power than cams. So that's just a given. But when you port the head and do cams, you really need to make sure that you have an exhaust that can breathe. If you have a lot of back pressure, the motor's not going to make any power, because you're literally going to shove that back pressure back into the motor, because now the exhaust breathes both ways. So if you have something that is a restriction in the exhaust, you're going to put the stock head on, going to go, oh, the stock head is better. And that's not the case. It's something more of a semi-recent discovery, noticing that it becomes more prevalent and a really big flowing head. Seems like I just lost people, because I just had 4 people, and then it went, and so I don't know what this thing does. I swear YouTube Live messes up the numbers all the time. They do it just to mess with you. All right, so closed loop. Let's start there. So we have a map sensor. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to do this in single letters just to make it easier. So MP for map, IA for IAT. You got ECT. Sorry. ECT. So you got map. Well, that's a basic. You can do a basic motor on a map, IAT, and ECT. But there is the boost pressure sensor on these, which goes in the charge pipe. And then you have the MAF. I'm going to put that as MF. Now, these are all signals sent to the ECU, right? And the ECU processes it. We're going to put a P there for processing it. Now, after it processes it, it sends this information out to the fuel injectors, and then it goes out the exhaust. All right? That is considered open loop. So basically, this is open loop because you don't have any sort of return. Now, in the case of closed loop, it's actually not super complicated. We put in this O2, right? And the ECU goes to O2. It goes back here. And then after it sends this out initially, right, it goes back to the ECU. And then it makes an adjustment. So while this is great, this is actually, believe it or not, going open loop when your tune isn't done correctly. Yeah, open loop will help, but it won't save a shitty tune. It just won't. But this is not just in terms of actual fuel. This is just an example. Any sort of process where after it spits out an initial calculation and after the calculation is done, we add another sensor into the circuit that comes back and alters that calculation, that is going to be considered closed loop. So let me see. You could consider, so another example, let me see. Here's another example. So we have ignition timing. Let's say the ECU has processed the information, puts out the ignition timing, and then we have that timing that's just there. So I'm going to put IG. So this is the ECU. And we have traction control. This is another perfect example of closed loop. So we have the ABS sensor, right? We have front right, front left, rear right, rear left. Takes all these numbers and then sees the difference and then comes back to the ECU, changes the information, and spits out a different ignition timing. So traction control is another perfect example of closed loop. So in many cases, the ECU, everybody thinks open loop, closed loop only deals with fueling, but that's not the case. So that's why. That is a prime example of when it comes down to open loop versus closed loop, it doesn't always mean to deal with fuel. And open loop is just a calculation where after it spits out the calculation, it never changes it. So old school cars, they would just on the computer, they'd put in a number and then spit it out. But again, closed loop just means after the calculation is already done, we go back in and we change it with something. That's just kind of a perfect example of how I can give it the easiest explanation. What about 7670? Well, I have an EFR 8370, but if you got somebody that can fabricate it, hold on. I have a brand new EFR 8370. This bad boy will spit out that and then some. It will destroy a 7670. It has a big enough compressor wheel that it's still going to spool decently. I would put this in the neighborhood of at least high sixes, maybe even more. So this is an EFR 8370, and you can see it by the size of the compressor wheel. And I had somebody that was going to fab this up and decided that they were going to go MIA. Well, not really MIA. They said basically they didn't want to deal with it. No. They didn't want to deal with the cast of the housing possibly because you have to turn this either into a V-band or take what I think would work is if you got two of the plates for the cylinder head, right? Just to kind of stack them out and then put one on here, one on the cylinder head, and voila. So, but I won't let this go for less than $1,800. I just paid way too much for it. It's brand new, literally never been used. I mocked it up, and with the right adapter housing, it fits in the engine bay. It definitely fits. So you would need your fabricator to weld something to the wastegate actuator, still internally gated, but this will definitely cut the mustard. I guess you could do something with the plate that already exists here, where you could take an actuator. Let's see if I got any over here. I probably have them all in the house. So you could literally take an actuator and just have this plate built like a little extra piece of material on it, and then just go from there, because this plate is pretty solid. Sorry for all the bouncing around, but that's another option. This would be the way I'd go first before I go a 7670. I go in 8370. So this thing could probably, because your cam's imported head, man, you can rent to $8,000, and to me, this is the way to go. But again, fabrication. So that's the thing, fabrication. People that to fabricate it. I guess like a lot of guys that are super busy, like Rampage is busy and they can't. They just told me straight off from the start they couldn't get into it. And I have around here somewhere, I have a V-band adapter that you could literally maybe weld onto the end of this. It's a T3 to V-band. That would work perfectly. And like I said, this thing is, I wish I could have put this on there, because that would have been one of a kind in the world. And Luke from Four Piston will tell you, you can't blow these things up. The EFR turbos, he just pounds on them and pounds on them and pounds on them, and they just don't let go. This is good. FYI, 45 pounds of boost this thing will do. Just to clarify that. So, I wonder, I doubt the cylinder head is done. Yeah, regardless if you did a 7670 or an 8370, you're absolutely going to need custom fab. So, well, Tim, that's more for like built motor cam cars. That's pretty much what that's for. It's if you're going to track the car, okay, and do like laps, that's a really good turbo for something with a really long straightaway. But if you're doing like autocross, what the hell just happened? My screen, there it goes. If you're doing like autocross or short type turns and stuff, I wouldn't go that route. That's not something I would choose to go that route. So looking at the SI cylinder head, I did notice right out the gate that there's more open than I thought they would be. However, what would you be similar to a Garrett? It'd probably be, I would say that to be right in between a 770 and a 900. That's where I put that, but the boost pressure level on that it can take is just way higher. The 8370, well, if I really put that out there, EFR 8370. Let me look at the compressor map, because it's been 79 pounds a minute. So, but the compressor map at 79 pounds a minute, when you look at the compressor map, you don't get that typical Garrett fall off that happens over here. It just goes up, up, and up. Thing's got a monster for compressor map, and it's looks like 4.8 bar absolute, 4.7 bar absolute is max. So we do it this way: 4.7 times 14.5 equals minus 14.5 divided by 14.5 3.70 times. Like max boost, they consider acceptable is like 50 pounds of boost. So if you got something like that and you put it on like Motec, just whoop, lots and lots of boost. Yeah, that would be a monster roll race turbo. So, I mean, a G30 770 will make more than 600, but it just, I don't know about like pushing it that hard reliably. That's asking a lot of a 770 reliably long term. Let me see if I got that cylinder head. I mean, give me 2 seconds. Let me see how much time left on that cylinder head. Interesting. So, my disaster outside, don't mind it. I gotta clean up this mess. I had my hot tank up here, but ooh, this bad boy's hot. Well, she's starting to clean up pretty quickly. But the problem I'm having is getting these ports clean, get a good look at them. Actually, one of them's not too bad. All right, wait, put it back in the shop, and then we'll go take a look. All right, that's my mini hot tank there. All right, let's see. And she's still definitely very hot. Cycle wasn't finished, but it's definitely better than it was. I first pulled it open, I couldn't even see inside this port. I found this interesting. Hey, boys. Woo. All right. This is the first look at a clean SI head, as I've dealt with SIs, but I have not had an SI head off to do R&D on. And that's the whole point of this one. This is an R&D, well, it's going to go on a customer's car, but it's an R&D head as well. Now, what's interesting is these ports are not like the Fk8. They are not chopped down as much, but I can definitely see how they decided to make this tumble. I'm not a huge fan of that. Geesh. There's a hard cut into each one where they cut into the valve seat and it cut into the cylinder head. And I mean, there's room to make power because there's still the floor. That's still a sharp edge on the floor. So there's definitely room to make power and improvement. Now, not necessarily the same way as the Type R and the exhaust ports. Yeah, they got the same big dimples from the spark plug area, and those can definitely be cleaned up quite a bit. The concern is how much can you cut in there? And the hard way to find out, but you do this. So I'm going to teach you guys a little something here. What you do is you're trying to put a pick in the water port here. This water port goes into here, and it gives you an idea the amount of clearance you have there. Now, what they're doing is, it's so difficult to see on camera. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but there's a nub in there. So let me see if I can. Okay, see that little nub? Let me see if I can pull this closer. So there is a nub here, and things like this, right, that stick out, these have some of the biggest effect on porting. So that is where so wait, what's this? Hold on a second. Wait, I missed it. Get there one day. Minutes. For a turbo Maxus, it should have built motor instead of putting full virus kit on. Yeah, Tim, you would have had a built. Yeah, if you had done it that route. Another thing I noticed, which is rather interesting, is the. Whoa, did we lose a valve guide seal? Did she pop off? It did. Look at that. So that tells me that the guide seals were soaked in oil. So that's from the carbon buildup. What this is a valve seat, basically a valve seat, a valve spring seat. And the spring sits on this, and this goes over the guide. Can't get my fingers in there at the moment, but this goes over the guide in here. So let me see. This guide, I turn that a little bit maybe. There we go. So this guide, right around the base of the guide, you see this cup area. That's where this little seat goes. So looks like just from the heat of just literally cleaning it, the valve guide seal popped off. That literally means that at the time this motor, the valve guide seal was literally just being held on by carbon. So that's pretty crazy that popped off like that so easily. And you only see that when they swell up real bad, you know, and when they swell up real bad and then they pop off like that. That's fairly unusual. But sometimes methanol will do that. And another thing I'm interested in, I'm going to have to take a little bit of time, is looking at the outlet on this exhaust. Let me see if I can. I doubt I'm going to catch this on camera. But if we're looking at the exhaust, where the Type R, this is pushed back further and it's more round. This reminds me more of the older K series, where the port shape was more that squarish shape, right? And these lines actually come in further, where dividers come out further. So, but you have to ask yourself, is this dividers going to make a difference like that? Like, is it going to chopping back dividers or making them thinner? You know, is that going to help? You know, I could tell you that pocket porting the exhaust and cleaning up the transitions inside of the actual port on the intake side is going to make a huge difference. But is it going to be as huge of a difference as an Fk8? That's very hard to say. And I could definitely tell you that I don't like the way the air comes through in the SI motor. I don't like it at all after seeing the way this port is. And that's going to be a hard thing to correct, because the air, the injector comes out right through this hole pointing this direction. So, but yeah, so I got to have a little more time with the head and clean this thing the rest of the way up and figure out, you know, what's best. Anyways, so for those of you who haven't been here last week, I went over the FL5, and I still stand the same way I stand before, that the Fk8 turbo is better than the FL5 for the car. So even in the case of having an FL5 final drive, which Tim has. Speaking of which, buddy, how's the car, man? So you said it was way more responsive. So that was the last message we talked about. What was I working on? Oh, the dual half bridge. Oh, the E-gate. I wonder if I got myself into some waters with that thing, man. Whee! So I wish I had my car over here right now so I could show you guys, but it's in Reggie's shop and she's closed up at the moment. Or he's closed up at the moment. And I'm glad you're happy with it, man. How's the wife's car? She good too? How's her car feel? Because it sound speaking to us, Tim's car, his wife's car is the one that the dyno went what and said, "Oh, 700 wheel horsepower," which was hilarious. How's the wife's car, man? How's that feel too? Because it sounded mean on the dyno. Her car sounded angrier than yours. The other thing is, where was? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I was thinking about with these. So, oh yeah, the inlet design, man. This is strange. Remember, she's got a shorter final drive. So it's going to behave like it's got shorter gears and it's going to seem faster. Let me see if I can stand that up. There we go. I kind of felt this was strange about these. Let me block that light off. They have like this weird D-shaped port. And I could tell you that there's the way they've got the divider, it goes all the way up here. You can't see that. Come on, baby. There we go. Maybe not. Oh, shoot, man. Let me see if I can tip it. I know that's bright and reflection. It's not going to help me. Why is this thing asking me about leaving the site? I don't want to leave the site. That's interesting, because it was tuned by the same guy, and he put like 3 pulls on the car. That's a shame. So, I'm trying to think of what the hell. There was something else, man. This drives me nuts, man, when I cannot remember for the life of me. So, actually, I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think, man? Keep the live on Thursday or move it to Saturday? Because right now I have a bit less of an audience on Saturday. And maybe I should have posted 30 minutes ago that I was going live. Oops. But what's more convenient for the people? That's what I need to ask, because it's you, the people. Yeah, I know it sounded angry as hell on the dyno too. Funny, I could probably go back and reverse calculate the power for the torque. Yeah, so that's the question for everybody else. What's easier, Thursday evenings or Saturday early evening? I know for some people it's California, it's 3:00 on a Saturday, but I figured maybe if I did the live and we were done by like 7:30, people would just kind of enjoy the live and then go out. I didn't want to interrupt people's evenings. I didn't feel that was like fair, but I wanted to try to just give to the community what they want. I wish I had something special for you guys. I really do. That polls are mine. I posted in the FK group chat. Polls are mine. Well, okay, yeah, we could do that. I mean, so you know what, guys? I've never done a video poll. Like, okay, you want this day or that day? I don't even know how to set those darn things up, to be honest with you. Okay, so then it is back to Thursdays. Okay, well then that is what it is, because unfortunately on Thursdays lately I've been working past 8:00. So obviously the business has to come first, and it stinks that I have to do that sometimes. So, but I guess I'm just going to have to move it to today instead. I got something. Here we go. Oh, I got something funny for you guys. You're going to love this. Oh, you're going to love this. You are going to love this. This is hilarious. This is hilarious. Where is it? Okay. All right. I know I'm laughing like an evil man. 500, 600 wheel horsepower fuel pump. $1,400 wheel horsepower fuel pump. When I did this the other day, man, I was dying. I was like, oh my God. It is like the difference between a can of Pepsi and a freaking 2-liter. This thing is huge. So this is an Aeromotive brushless 5 GPM pump. Let me get away from the glare. 5 GPM pump. Now, gallons per minute, not per hour. So that is, we do the math, that is 300 gallons per minute. Now, this is rated, this is rated at 90 PSI, not at 40 PSI. So if you go to their website, right, and you go to their website, all right, and so you go 5 GPM. This is also a variable speed pump, guys. So this pump rewires on it. And what we have is we have the power and ground for your pump, and this variable speed is a 5-volt input. Now you could do 5-volt or you could do 12-volt, but at 0.5 of a volt, it actually runs at a low speed. And at 5-volt, 3.7 volts, it runs a high speed. What I'm going to do when I remove the methanol from the car is I'm going to take this signal, the 5-volt signal from a boost pressure sensor, an AEM 3.5 bar, and use the vacuum line I have from the methanol kit, and I put that into this system. So basically, that vacuum signal from that boost pressure sensor will run this pump. So when it's sitting there at idle, it will be at the lowest speed. And as boost pressure increases, this will increase. Now, this is a spur gear driven pump. Now, I don't know as much about these pumps yet. And unfortunately, it's so difficult to see, but there's gears inside here. And from what I can grasp from the inlet is that the actual gears pull fuel in and then push it through the pump and out. And this is a brushless pump. And as huge as this is, right, it doesn't even take double the power of this. So a Walbro 525 takes the same amount of power to run as this brushless bad boy. So what I'm going to do is take both my pumps, my in-tank pump that's going to fill the surge tank, and use an MSD relay module. Now this bad boy, audio's cutting out really bad. Anybody else having that problem? Well, the audio is cutting out. I don't know why. I don't know why it would be cutting out. If it is, I'm sorry. Like, I'll just try to talk slower. Is it cleared up now? Because I don't know how to reset the stream. Okay. So I'll start over. The 5 GPM pump takes about as much power as a Walbro 525 because it is brushless. But if I click, all right. Right. Oh, okay. All right. Well, if you guys could go back out and go back in, that would be great. So this is a relay module. And there's 2 ways to operate this. Ground trigger, or you can have it constantly ground, remove this bridge here, and use a positive trigger, which I'm going to remove this and have that. Now, they suggest, I believe, 4 gauge in, their 4 gauge wire in, and then 8 gauge out, and 240 amps. The other really nice thing, which is really awesome, is there's 2 little LEDs here. These LEDs let you know that it is on. So I think that's really cool as well. Now, the other way to go about doing this is put this other one, I could use this other relay just to trigger the speed sensor, but that's kind of overkill. So I'm going to power both of my pumps, the in-tank pump that fills the surge tank, and this insane thing. By the way, guys, just so you know, this costs as much as an XDI pump, and it hurt to buy it. But here's the thing. If I do a triple pump setup, these were meant to run at like 40 PSI. They're not meant to run. These are not meant to run at 90. These are meant to run at up to 150 PSI. So that running this at 150 PSI is, if I really ever need to. So if I run a base pressure of 50 and I run 50 pounds of boost, this thing will take 100 PSI of fuel pressure, no problem. So, and again, that's because I'm going port injection in. All right. There we go. Oh, yeah. There we go. You know I put them back in here, right? Yes, I did. So, the other thing, I had IDX 250s and they weren't the right size. So, but they make cap adapters. So basically, these are the IDX 1050s. I bought these off of Nick Ellenberger over a year ago. And I ran them through my machine to clean them up and get them going. And they're good. And I paid, I think it was like $18 a piece for these adapters. Oh, yeah. Of course, I send that thing flying. For these adapters. And they come from Injector Dynamics. And they basically, if you buy that particular injector number, it's going to have that cap. Now, when using a radium plate, you use it just like this. Now, when it comes down to the Prackworks carbon intake manifold, I have to use these. They're longer. I forget. I think it's 48 millimeter. Don't quote me on that, but I'm not sure if it's 48 millimeter. Where is this one? Is trans fluid. Just something to coat it to put it back in, because when I put them on, I just literally licked them so they went on. Just a little something to make sure they sit nice and clean. But yeah, so that's what I'll be using. So, and I am working on getting a bigger high pressure pump. And I'm hoping that with this bigger high pressure pump, I will have the ability also to test it on Honda. I don't know yet. I've been discussed it to sit there and work with XDI on the 60 series pump. And I hope things come through sooner than later, because I am not sure, but last I was told with XDI, for those of you that don't know or are waiting for one, last I was told they're waiting on base plates. So I'm not sure what the heck is the holdup over there. I know just sometimes things when they're made, they just have issues. So was it this one? This is not not that baggy. I know I have them here. No, that one's a pedal sensor. Where did I put them? So somewhere around this disaster of a shop, I have connectors that are for, yeah, they're in here. E-gate. E-gate. Where's that darn wastegate connector? I found the wastegate connector. There we are. There we go. So I found the wastegate connector so that this way I can simulate the wastegate connection to attach my dual half bridge onto. No, I didn't find it. Dang it, man. I guess I'm going to have to go back and look again because this one's upside down. I guess I didn't find it. All right. Try again. Bigger pump on Honda. You know, the XCI pump's pretty sufficient for most stuff. Unfortunately, it just has its limitations. You know, man, I goofed here. I don't know how the hell I did that. I ordered the wrong connectors. I really don't want to cut into my wastegate actuator connector. Really don't want to do that. Or is that the wrong? Is this it? Oh, there we go. I do have it. I was going to say, there it is. So, voila. So basically, I'm going to take the straight connector on the car for the wastegate actuator and use that in order to basically set up the dual half bridge that unfortunately it's in the car right now. I have to wire it in because that E-gate takes 20 amps. And the Motec really only does 10 amps. Now, I could get away with putting it on there, but I take a risk of either not driving the wastegate correctly or nuking an output on the Motec, which I really don't want to do because I waited 9 months just to get one. But, are these? Yeah. So, no, this is not for what, not for that. This is for, is this 5-wire or 4-wire? Oh, this is 5-wire. I probably ordered both because I didn't know which one I needed. So, because the map sensor tier 3 cam harness is a 4-wire. So, what I probably did was just order both to make sure. The only thing I don't like is the clip itself is a bit smaller, but everything else is literally identical. So, nice little piece right here. Well, your buddies may love it, but a lot of them don't love the port injection from SES. I've been contacted a few times about retuning it because they don't like the behavior. Works good on a dyno, but there's many scenarios where it does not work well. Look, I don't got a problem with him at all. I got a problem with the fact he said my fuel system was trash compared to his. That's what I got a problem with. So, and, you know, that's what I don't like. Ooh, no MAF tune and with MAF tune differences. Okay, we can do that. Let me do that right now. I'm going to show you why a no MAF tune is superior, even in Honda. All right. That's perfect, man. I like that. Hold on, let me get this cylinder head out of the way. Get this ginormous pump. Let me see which box was this bad boy in. There we go. I'm going to tell you why it's superior. And I'm going to tell you why. Because people are saying, oh, there's no backup. There's a problem. That won't work. It's dangerous. I'll show you why it's not. All right. We have in a regular, we have the map, we have the IAT, we have the math, IAT2, boost pressure sensor, and we have the ECT. We have all of those. So these are all the sensors that go into the calculation of your fuel. Fuel, output, O2, and then back in. So we have 5 calculations that the ECU has to do in a ridiculous amount. Now, if you think about it, motor's rotating 7,000 RPM. It's 3,500 ignition events a second. I mean, oh, sorry, rotations per minute. Sorry, my math is wrong there. Jesus. Okay, so let's do this. How many ignition events do we have per second? So if we do this way, 3,500 divided by 60 equals 58 ignition events per second. 58 times per second that the ECU has to spit out this calculation. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inputs it's got to worry about to make this calculation. And technically 7, because we got to deal with the O2 coming back and putting out the short-term trim, either minus or positive, whatever it decides, depending on what the target is. So we have 7 sensors here. If I turn around and I ditch this, we now have map sensor, IAT, boost pressure sensor, and ECT. Why is this better? Because the ECU cares about the manifold temperature more than it cares about the inlet temperature or the MAF. When you upgrade the turbo or do things like cams, which really becomes a problem, this sensor has a VE chart. A MAF sensor doesn't have one. It just goes by a fuel input. So when you turn around and put cams in it, this MAF sensor does not read the same as this VE. See, MAF is no VE chart. MAF is just a scaling. So we'll put SC for scaling. So now, in the case of cams, since we can't really mess with this correctly, the VE chart, now we've got a discrepancy here between the two, which is bad. Now, even if we upgrade the turbo, change the back pressure, we're still doing the same thing, just not as extreme, port to head. So now the ECU is going to jump back and forth, and you'll see fuel trims going nuts, or in the case when you start getting to high boost, it'll jump up because it's trying to pull fuel out, and all of a sudden, boom, it drops fuel back in. There's just such a discrepancy in the target and the calculation between these two. And the ECU, the fuel output, they don't know what is going on. Now, because of that, it's throwing the extra calculation in. When it brings back the O2 calculation, it's still dealing with the extra calculation in here, and it's not sure what to do because of it. It's trying to put out the closest one that it thinks is accurate, but because we have that discrepancy, we have a problem. By eliminating that, we have the MAP, IAT, boost pressure sensor, ECT. We've gone from 6 inputs to 4. That's 2 inputs the ECU does not have to calculate. So in that 58 calculations a second for ignition events, or should say fuel injector events. I don't want to say ignition, but fuel injection event, same thing. And if it's doing split injection, which is 2 injections per time, that's basically 120 injections per second. Okay, at that RPM. Wouldn't do split injection at that RPM, but you would do it at low RPM. It doubles. So let's say you did split injection at 1500, it would just literally double the amount. And that's basically for what we call a lean burn. So now by eliminating it, even if this short-term trim is greater or less, let's say it needs to add 9% instead of 5%. Let's just say that's the case. One, you don't have these two calculations that were there. They're gone. Those two calculations are not there. So the ECU doesn't bounce between VE and math. It doesn't have to try to combine those two anymore. It just has one signal, goes, okay, we're offset from this one signal. I know I'm exactly this much off. I'm going to put out that much. When the ECU bounces between the two, because it's a blended chart until it decides whenever not to blend it at a certain point. There's no point in the ECU that lets you know. Because even though when you go to fuel status, the fuel status will stay on fuel status 2, but it still bounces between the two. So there's calculations in the background that tell the computer when and how to blend these numbers. So, but we don't see them. See, in AP tuners, when we deal with a VE and a math table, we can turn off one or the other. See, if we could turn off above a certain point, RPM, you don't need VE in math because the velocity's there. You don't need it. And if that was the case, math would work fine on cams. It wouldn't matter because we could turn off the VE. And that's what we do. That's what Chevys do. They turn off the VE and they run solely off a math signal. And in the late models, a math signal and a short-term trim. But because we can't do that, we go back to just chopping it out of the equation. And even if the ECU has to swing 18% of fuel trim, it literally happens in almost half the time. So rather than having the ECU pull, and those trims, they look totally different. So I'll give you guys a picture of an idea of what happens at high boost in the trims and a fuel line. What'll happen is, let's say we have our target fuel line coming down here. That's our target fuel line. It'll come in fine, and all of a sudden, boom, it goes rich. So then we get minus, usually comes out to like 16%. Boom, and then it comes in, okay, fine. It's pulling out fuel for that amount of time, right? And then, which way does it swing from there? No, I'm sorry, it's the other way around. It goes lean, right? So it goes plus whatever it goes, 16 or whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, we're seeing a 10.5 AFR. And now it's got to take out that plus 16 trim. So the trim line is like this, goes up, comes down. The ECU can't keep up. So it just floods the motor. So, and the same thing goes for port injection. We run into this same problem when you go too far with port injection. That's why I don't agree with doing port injection that way, because you're relying on short-term trims because that's your only option. And if you screw with the math scaling, so, and then this has got to come back in, it's delayed, you've already flooded the motor, you've overrun the fuel system, and you have to back the car off. So when we do this with VE, what happens is all the way back here, we get a little bit of a lean spike. So we're already in the positive 5, and it might go positive, as much as positive 18, but it comes back down fast, right? So our trim is already positive. It comes back, and it comes back down quick. Well, sorry, the fuel comes back down quick, right? And this is our trim line. And instead of doing that, the trim line does this. I usually see about a plus 10 to plus 8. And the fuel stays on target the rest of the pull. So now you can push the car harder in a non-math tune. So in a VE based tune, because all you have is a little blip under like no boost, literally no boost, where it goes to the positive trim, which is where it's safer. And even if you step in from a higher RPM, you don't get a big lean spike. So doing a no MAF tune, even with cams, with the TR2 cams, is safer. This is a TR2 cam. In the case of a non-TR2 cam and a ported head, in just a ported head, you might see, you won't see that lean, you won't see that. You might see like +3 and end out at like -5. So either way, you don't have these huge problems. And the only reason in the TR2 cam that you end up with a positive is because at your idle target, you're at -9. So 9% of that trim is from the idle target that changed the cams and the cams. If you could find a way to lock out your long-term trim, all right, if you find a way to lock out that long-term trim so that it doesn't pull out that 9% long-term and have to add it later, it wouldn't even do that. But either way, a no MAF is safer on cams than not on cams. Now, to the last point where somebody has been saying that it's not safe. So we go back to the MAP sensor, right? MAP sensor, IAT, ECT. We're going to put no MAF and a boost pressure sensor. Okay? So we're down to 4 over here. What happens? What happens if the MAP dies? Guys, we still have a boost pressure sensor. And you know how I know that matters? Because this MAP sensor is a 3.6 bar. I exceeded 3.6 bar. This is 3.6 bar. So it's 2.6 absolute, which comes out to 37 pounds, guys. I already told you I did 41 PSI. And it's still red in the dyno. Why? Because this boost pressure sensor is a 4 bar. That boost pressure sensor in the charge pipe is a 4 bar sensor. So even if one of these two do happen to go out, though, let's say in hot data, they're still going to run. The other advantage, if for some reason you blow up a charge pipe in the case of a MAF-tuned car, you pull a ton of air past the MAF and it goes out in the atmosphere and the computer doesn't know that there's a leak because you're just pulling air past that sensor and blowing it out to the atmosphere. Well, it floods the shit out of the car. So VE versus MAF-less, what am I going to choose? I'm going to choose no MAF. And there is a backup sensor. And I just told you, if the long-term trim's a 0, even with cams, you're only off by 10% on your target at worst. So if for some ungodly reason you have a 12.5 target, 10%, it'll go 13.5, but it's better than 14.7, which I've seen on, and again, you have another safety. I forgot. There's another safety. Your O2 sensor can control trims. So even if you lose one of these, you still got a boost pressure reading and your O2 can still control your fuel. So that's where, again, there's a limit to those trims though. And the one thing you can't do properly from the inputs is when you're doing port injection, if you go beyond 20% in the trims, and I've said this, you need to be no more than 20% in the trims, because if you do, the ECU, when you happen to switch in and out of boost, it can't keep up. It's just not fast enough. Now, with a no MAF tune, it's faster, significantly faster. But when you're trying to substitute some ridiculousness like stay on stock high pressure pump and add beyond 40% fuel, because the car itself, if you're doing like stock fuel system and port injection, the car itself can only do on stock fuel system like 430 horsepower. So if you add that ethanol, okay, let's just say 460 in the sake of no ethanol, and you're doing all the ethanol via port, you're still, I've seen numbers over 500, you're still over that 40% mark. So now the correct way to eliminate this problem is to put a harness from the MAP sensor to the ethanol input and play with the ethanol tables as a MAP sensor table. But again, when you are substituting that much fuel, it doesn't run clean. You're gonna run into problems. So until the VE tables, now if Honda, okay, there is an advanced SI table, advanced ethanol SI table. It is literally RPM and ethanol 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. And they literally have this table in the SI, and it goes up to 6,000, which would be significant enough. Use that same input, steal that input, and even if we didn't have the true VE tables, you can input in these boxes changes in fuel, steal that signal. Now, I asked for that, but at this point, we don't have it on the Type R. I would love to have that on the Type R. The reason I would love to have that on the Type R is this makes tuning TR3 cams way better. So I would absolutely love to have that chart on the Type R. It would be fantastic to have it. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sure, you know, they want to sell the CTR MAP 500, and that's maybe it is, maybe it isn't part of it. Maybe they just don't have all the tables cleared up correctly yet. So yeah. So I mean, so the thing is with the NOMAF tune, there is the literal only downside, okay? The only downside is low RPM light throttle response isn't as like wow, like in your face instant. That's the only difference. So and there's another thing I should tell you about. When you're dealing with it, there is one other calculation that is a limit. All right, and that is torque request. Here's the problem too, okay? With the torque request, all right, and you have the math, the fuel demand goes into that torque request, okay? And when you have cams, all right, and it's in the torque request and you're bouncing between these two outputs, it's calculating a different torque. That's another thing. So calculated torque equals a different calculated request of the throttle plate. So the other thing is people that do something like screw with the MAP scaling. This is another part where it's bad. We deal with air charge. I know it turned into like a lesson, but this is what drives me nuts about a lot of stuff. You deal with air charge. Well, air charge is calculated off of MAP and MAP. Now this MAP, we know we can't change because the VE, right? These guys go, and because the car is so sensitive to air charge, they tune it off air charge and screw with the map scaling. So when the map scaling instead of looking like this, they go in and they try to make up for port injection or whatever else, and they do this to try to get rid of it. The problem is when the ECU goes to search for an air charge, because you're tuning off air charge, this air charge calculated number is now too low, but then when it jumps between the two, all of a sudden you see a 200 air charge when it's reading off this, and then you see a 160 down here. So then the boost request goes, yep, sky high. So that is another reason why I don't like doing the port injection on the Fk8, because of that particular way that the system functions. Even when you're doing a boost request in the regular boost request charts, it still tries to do that. And then it doesn't stay in the fuel status 2 like it should. And this is where many people make many mistakes. Even some of the top guys out there can make that mistake, unfortunately. Can I build an SI? Yeah, I can build them to go type faster than a Type R. Not built versus built. Yeah. Well, okay, so the L15, while the architecture might not be as good, but there is an advantage that I kind of like a little bit better. And that is the cam caps, the style of the cam caps. They are kind of built partially into the head, and structurally that's stronger. So if you guys go look back at an old B series, the cam caps go straight across the whole head, and that makes the head stronger. Now these don't go straight across the whole head, but that increases the structural integrity of the L15B head. So I have seen less L15 head gaskets, but I've seen more Type R head gaskets. But when you have a cam cap built into the head like this, there's a structure here, and the head bolt goes right here. So, and it comes straight across. So this acts like a cross beam. So that I like, but the old B series went straight across completely, but the head bolts were in a different spot. The reason the head bolts are so close in is because this is all exhaust outlet area. So, and the head bolts, I think the structure is fine on these for a lot of power. I think here's what I think. I think there hasn't been enough good L15 builds. I think there's a lot more left in them. I think you need to be able to run these on an aggressive cam. And I think there is one guy out there that is literally doing the there's a Motec harness for the SI. There's somebody else that mentioned about a different company for the SI for a standalone ECU. I think it was Max ECU, which would be possible, but don't ask me to wire the whole thing. I don't like wiring to begin with. So I've spilled the beans on a lot of stuff that a lot of tuners overlook, and they'll argue it, but whatever, they miss it. So did you guys ever notice that there's a tuner out there who is doing much better on the FL5 than he did on the Fk8, and I'm going to say it's because the strategy's completely different on the FL5. It's more boost pressure than air charge now. So that is why, and the map scaling has less of a oomph into the system on that. There is, however, another glitch in the system, and it's got to do with cam timing getting locked. So Uh, Wait, who are talking about being so far away? Oh, okay. So on the Prattworks manifold, I'm waiting for the precision turbo to be done, guys. So here's what happened. I wanted the precision turbo to be done. I'm trying to get to an event on August 20th. And I want to be able to run the precision 6466. I want the port injection done, the E-gate done, all that stuff done. There's been delays. And the only thing I can do is, if it's not finished, is put my Garrett back on. And I don't know, man. Like, I'm just hoping it gets done sooner than later. That's all I can say. I didn't expect to be this far behind at this point, unfortunately. I was kind of hoping to be a little bit further ahead. So, reverting to math topic, PRL race math versus rampage. All right, so where did I put? Did I really just lose that stupid marker? There it goes. All right. There's two areas in the math. You'll have a fueling, and then it'll do this. And there's two areas. The rampage, the 4-inch math. The areas are 4.2 and 4.8 volts. For whatever reason, the calculation at 4.2 volts and at 4.8 volts does this in the fueling. With the PRL, you hit this number on a stock turbo car, and depending on how high you go, you can hit that number again in the high RPM, where it just the fuel just did wah, 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 wah. And it doesn't matter what you do to the math scaling. This is just an imbalance between VE and the math. So between the two, just an imbalance somehow, or some funky calculation where this number got overlooked, which is very possible why the Honda engineers went to the different math in a frequency. The frequency based, I generally have not seen that in frequency-based math. So this could also be why the other tune I'm talking about is doing a lot better on the FL5 than he did on the Fk8. That could be the other thing. The other thing is the O2 output on. So, yeah, by the way, the Rampage math, those numbers generally are in an area that is very rarely touched. So, and if you hit 4.8 volts on a Rampage 4-inch math, you are literally at like 680. Somewhere around there. That Rampage math is good for 715. So the PRL is good for about 630, and the Rampage for about 715. So right around those numbers, depending on how efficient your setup is. So I want to mention something about dyno numbers, and Tim can verify this. So So I wish Abe still had his Type R, because Abe only made 515 and he spanked everybody. Even I forget his name, but he went back to Red Star because he was having problems. He wouldn't believe that he had a problem. And then put cams, ported ahead, and then still had a problem. Well, there's your answer. Abe spanked Irving. And Abe, so this is why I'm going to tell you, whatever dyno number you made doesn't always matter, because an 80 wheel horsepower difference, even if you're not a great driver, even if you're not that great of a driver, 80 wheel horsepower difference or 70 wheel horsepower difference is huge. That's cars, multiple. So I don't agree. I agree that a number is just a number on that day. See, like Tim's car, I could have pushed 390 something. He wanted a track tune, and it was lower torque. It read 360 and 383, and it's more drivable and on the track. You don't want, even if you, what these guys don't get, here's what they don't get, and this is where the problem is. And we do a dyno pull, let's say we make 580. All right, boom, 580. Right, and here's our peak. We do that hit on the dyno, the car is cold. It's not real world conditions. The car gets hot, and now gets so damn hot because we're pushing that turbo like a hair dryer. But all of a sudden, this same 580, 2 gears later, 530. And you don't know this. You just think you're making 580. And they're like one-hit wonders. And the other thing that they do, they just go for one little, peak. And they don't realize that when I tune cars, that's not how I tune them. Because this is what I call a hair dryer method. It just turns into heat right after. And when I tune them, this is what you get. This right here, that right there, is what wins. That's what makes the difference. When you see a guy that on a dyno, we make some big peak number and the torque does this, okay? I promise you that guy's going to lose versus my torque line that does this. Every time they'll lose because of this area right here. Because this is useless. Completely useless. All it does is knock the tire off. You look at every single one of my tunes. I'm going to do everything in my power to make that curve. It's power under the whole curve that matters, and being able to repeat that curve. And every time that man steps into the gas, you get that power. Abe was on a dyno, and he did 3 back-to-back hits, and they were within 4 horsepower. Back to back to back. That means when he's out on the street and he's going gear to gear to gear to gear, it's the same power in every gear. And I do all my dyno hits hot. I did let it, I think maybe with Tim's car, the most I let it cool down is 5 minutes. Because it was dumb hot in the garage. It was like 102. I let it cool down for 5 minutes because we didn't have a lot of air over the car. So, yeah, well, your power technically, Tim, is actually, it's not actually less. It's actually more over the whole curve. So a number is a number. Yeah, so again, yeah, you'd get them from the jump. So yeah, see again, racing, yeah, it really just depends. That's why that's the biggest mistake that everybody makes is they look at what is my peak number. Um the what did it make? 30 pounds made, I think it was like 720 or something. Yeah, I think that's what it was. So when I had my G35 1050, um, I made on 30 pounds, it was like 720 something. And but the thing was, when that mother came on, bro, that shit was like this. And it was literally from 7K was like 680 and out to 8600. It was making, sorry, it was just at that point, it was still a flat line. It was 720. I only dropped, when I repped that high, right? I only dropped down to 6K. And, well, 6K was kind of more. And I'd probably say this was like 640. So across my average horsepower, the car was averaging around 680 wheel. That thing in fourth gear, I don't care what anybody says. That sucker, the car was like literally the car sat down like this and was literally going down the highway like this. Just, even though the wheels were straight, the car was literally just down the lane, just fourth gear in that thing was I got first time I did that in fourth gear in that car. I got home and my heart was racing for the next 40 minutes out of just sheer excitement. It was both, I wouldn't say terrifying, but anybody, any man who says that 700 wheel horsepower and a stock suspension front wheel drive car isn't a handful and doesn't make your eyeballs go boop, either has like a 1500 wheel horsepower Corvette or has no fear whatsoever. And the most I tried to put down was, I think, like 33, 33, 33. And that's like 750. And oh my God. And mind you, that turbo makes 30 pounds by 5,200. So, one other thing is like so say is the sweet spot in power. Oh, that's an easy answer. 550 to 6 is like the sweet spot. Um, you can still run stock suspension with a big enough tire, and yeah, it's a fun area, and the reason it's fun is because you can stay in it for enough time to enjoy yourself without thinking about, am I going to get arrested? Because when you're making that kind of power, like 160 miles an hour or 155, which was, no, that was 155. Dang, I'd have to do the math. But like 155, 160 miles an hour comes up really fast. And yeah, you got to think about, man, if I get pulled over, I'm screwed. So while I do have, man, I wish I could just was good at posting stuff on the computer and adding it into the picture. I would say, for those of you who don't know, the ultimate stock, I'd say for a 60 to 130, have I done a 60 to 130 pull on that setup? I've done a 60 to 130 on the G3900 without traction control, and it did a 7.0. The third gear just went bump, 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 and I short shifted a bit, but it was there to be had. And that was on stock transmission. Now, it's hard to say where it would land on the G3900 to see. It felt very different, and it was a little more difficult just simply because of the behavior of the car in trying to traction control. I don't yet have I contacted somebody, but they're not answering. I want to see if VitViper can give me the traction control via PID, meaning pulling ignition timing. So, actually, you know what? I should explain that because that works pretty good. So, yeah, well, it would be, I had a 315 35 17. No, actually, I'm sorry. At that point, I had a 275 Mickey Thompson ET Street SS. So, you know what? Just go to my video on my 60 to 130. Just go frame by frame. And that one is easy verification. So, funny thing was the damn Speedo can't keep up with it. At one point, it jumped 8 miles per hour. That's the one thing I don't like. But yeah, my Draggy, I have such a hard time with reception. The satellite reception. And for whatever damn time, when I try to record it on my phone, half the time when I try to finish the recording, it just freaking freezes. Does anybody have any answers for that on a Draggy? On why it does that and how to fix that? Because it drives me nuts, man. Because I can't be doing 10 different polls and it turn around and does that. Oh, you guys are funny. So I'll just do this real quick for you guys. What is PID? So the PID and on-under traction control, I love that, man. I think that is an absolutely amazing feature. And there's more extra settings to that, which make it more than a simple PID. But we'll kind of use this in cruise control for the best. Your P, I, and D. So let's say we're in cruise control and we have a target of 70 miles per hour. Okay? Your P is your first starting point. So what we're going to do with the P is we're going to increase the value until it gets as close to this line as possible and stable. You push that too far and it basically ripples or becomes unstable. So you want this as high as possible, but not unstable. Your I, as you increase your integral, this pulls you up to your line. But what you might see is this, which I'm sure some of you guys have seen in your fuel pump controls, that under your XDI pumps. This D, which we do not have in the pump control, unfortunately, does this. Takes that and turns this into right on top of it. That is what your D does. That is your smoothing. So close the target, get it the last bit on target, and you're smoothing. So PID idea itself is simple. God, this is the most information I've spit out in a single video. I don't mind it though. With the traction control, there's other factors in there. There is the rate, increase, decrease rate, and basically how fast. So PID, the eye only can control how fast to a point. But if you increase that too much, it does down the whole way. I've seen a lot of tunes like that in fuel pump control. That's why, like in the Honda one though, there's an increase decrease rate, and I think there's I gotta look at it. I just when I look at it, it's easier to deal with. Oh, you guys are terrible. I guess I was insane. Does anybody live around here? Because I want to fucking race. Pardon my language. Anybody near South Carolina? Anybody within 2 hours of South Carolina? I don't care if it's for fun. I'm not trying to look bad to people look bad. I just want to have a damn good time. Anyway, guys. Anybody got any questions about, I don't know, anything I put up on the board? What is drop your IG? Oh, you guys. Well, I know, Tim, you're 6 hours, man. My car's not back together yet. I'm saying what it is. We got to go out, man. Just go out with a bunch of cars. Get Logan out here. Get Robert out here. Get his car back together. All of the above. Yeah, they are. Yeah, I wish, buddy. Believe me, if I could afford to transport a car that far, man, I would, man. I'd love to. So, yeah, they see. Now that's a good question. Yeah, I am a coil radiator. There is one thing though, and this is where I also have a huge advantage. Okay, some know, and some don't know. There is called the oil squirter that goes under the piston. So you have your rod. Yes, I still, yeah. Oh boy, that looks like a penis. Let me not get it. An oil squirter that shoots oil underneath the piston. And I'm about to explain to you one of my big advantages is my oil cooler setup is different. It's not just the coil radiator that helps that. So the piston oil squirter shoots oil up underneath the piston to keep it cool. Let me see. See, it's going to be difficult to see this. There, see those little holes back there, guys? That is one to feed the oil ring out here. Two, this design, you squirt the oil in here, that's to cool the base of the piston to help keep the piston cool overall. So when you're running it's not just the actual coolant that keeps the engine cool. So does the oil. And in my setup, it's a little unique in the sense that the oil comes out of the pan, goes to where to pressurize the turbo, and I use an oil pressure regulator there instead of a restrictor. So, well, what is a restrictor? For those who don't know, inside of a ball bearing turbo, you cannot run more than 40 pounds of oil pressure because it blows the seals out and then they start to smoke. So this is not a restrictor. This is an open port, but the restrictors are small and they stop a lot of the oil coming through the turbo. So you rely on the coolant to cool the center section. So this adds to the heat of the whole system. And regardless of where you cool the oil in the system, the overall temperature is going to drop. So because my oil cooler is in front of my radiator, it gets a lot of cooling to the oil before it even goes to the turbo. So the two things I've done is I've created additional oil flow through the turbo by using the regulator, because the regulator, even when it's at lower oil pressure, at lower RPM, it still is able to feed as much oil. So at idle, you have 20 psi of oil pressure. That regulator only stops flowing at 40 psi. So you get more oil through the turbo, keep the turbo cooler. All right, you keep the turbo cooler, the water going through the turbo stays cooler too. So no matter where you cool it in the system, it's going to be better. And because my oil cooler is not hidden in like the fender, the tires over in the corner, it constantly sees air. So part of my cooling system overall to keep the engine cool, including the pistons, is right up in front. And so it's not just the coil radiator. It's also have an American modified front grille. I don't like the quality of the grille, but it does the job. So I'm just not a huge fan of the quality of the grille. It definitely does the job, though. So, another thing is, and actually, I should say this about oil coolers too. So, the disadvantage to having an oil cooler sandwich plate, I'll explain. The oil cooler sandwich plate, when you have the filter and you have the sandwich plate and you have your two lines running out to your cooler, and it's horrible. The two lines running out to your cooler. The problem is you're actually feeding this cooler before you feed the entire engine block. So that means that you're going to have a pressure drop against this cooler because you are sending the oil through the cooler before the entire engine block sees it. So that means that no matter what you do, that oil flow coming back out of the cooler into the engine is going to be a lower pressure. So what I did, because that hole is smaller, and keep in mind, oil flows at a really fast rate, okay? And if you flow something through a radiator too fast, you're not going to cool it off. So there's a disadvantage there in some cases, and depending on how you run it. The biggest disadvantage is the loss of oil pressure that you get running that way. Now, because mine You just go through the filter, you go straight into the block, right? And you have your little regulated hole out of the block to the turbo. That hole I'm using is after the oil is into the channel, into the block, is the time I take the pressure, and it's also regulated so that I can't take too much pressure. So in high RPM scenarios, and a lot of the time where I'd rather have the pressure cranking out to 9 grand initially, yes, the oil is flowing through the cooler slower, but the oil that goes through the cooler gets more time to cool down. So the rate at which that oil flows through that cooler is pretty damn astonishing. If you take off that cooler line, that feed line on the turbo, it's a lot of oil comes through there. A lot. These guys stop playing. But listen, guys, that's it, man, for today. Went a bit longer. Anthony, you got to check for a boost leak. First thing to start every time. Always go for the boost leak. That's all I can say, man. Without having the car here. That's the big thing, brother. You guys gotta have the car here. That's all, you know. Yeah, man. Listen, yeah, buddy. Well, I don't know, man. I got to list it and hopefully get rid of it soon, man. By the way, this week coming up, I'm going to give away more parts. So, spread the word, because I'm going to sit there and give away somewhere in one of the boxes maybe a piston rod, maybe a piston. Throw something in one of the orders this week for everybody. Just cool, paperweight or something. No, these are not any. Well, maybe the piston's okay and the rod's okay, but I'm not a fan of the S series rods. They're not tough. They're not great for a build. But these pistons, basically, they're no good because the wrist pins, the way they were installed, they're jammed up in there and they don't want to move right. So pistons are no good. This rod doesn't even want to. Yeah, see, they messed. Whoever did that motor, yeah, the rod is binding on the wrist pin and stuff. So that motor was no bueno. So again, pass the word out for those making orders. I'm going to throw something in there this week. And I hope y'all have a great week. And again, go to my IG, message me, let me know, or my Facebook. You guys want Thursday, Saturday? What do you prefer? What's best for everybody? I love y'all. Keep in touch. And I hope soon, let's get my car back out there, man. We'll get everything rolling and going. All right, guys. You'll have a wonderful evening.